The notification sound from my phone echoed through my hotel room in Prague at 3:47 a.m. local time. I'd been in the Czech Republic for 2 weeks, conducting financial oversight for an international banking compliance audit, the kind of methodical, boring work that made my family's eyes glaze over whenever they asked what I did for a living. Government stuff, I'd always say, which was technically true. What I didn't mention was that my government stuff involved tracking money laundering networks across 17 countries for the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. That night, my brother Marcus had sent a photo to our family group chat. A sold sign was planted firmly in front of my modest 2-bedroom house in Arlington, Virginia, the one I'd bought 3 years ago for $285,000. Well below my actual budget, but perfect for someone who traveled internationally 8 months out of the year and needed something small, secure, and forgettable. Finally got rid of that starter home albatross, Marcus had typed, followed by 3 celebration emojis. Investors paid $400,000 cash. Mia is going to thank me when she stops playing government desk jockey and gets a real job that can afford something decent. The responses came flooding in. Mom, thank God someone in this family has business sense. Dad, about time Maya stopped throwing money at that mortgage. Jessica, my sister, maybe now she can afford somewhere actually nice instead of that basic little box. I stared at the screen, my coffee growing cold as I read through 17 messages celebrating Marcus's initiative in saving me from my poor financial decisions. According to the family narrative, my modest government salary barely covered my mortgage payments. They'd been dropping hints for months about how I should cut my losses and rent something more reasonable. What they didn't know was that my house wasn't just my house. When you work for FinCEN with Level 3 security clearance, every financial asset is registered with federal oversight systems. My mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance claims, everything, flows through automated monitoring designed to flag unusual activity that might indicate compromise, coercion, or foreign influence. It's standard protocol for anyone with access to classified financial intelligence networks. What they especially didn't know was that selling federally monitored property without authorization triggers automatic investigation protocols within 6 hours. I took a screenshot of Marcus's messages and forwarded them to my supervisor, Janet Morrison, with a simple note. Unauthorized property transfer. Please advise. Then I went back to my audit spreadsheets. International money laundering networks don't investigate themselves. By Tuesday morning in Prague, the family celebration was still going strong. Marcus posted photos of himself at a steakhouse, toasting with champagne. To smart financial decisions and family looking out for family, he captioned. Mom shared his post with her church group. Dad forwarded it to his golf buddies, bragging about his son's business acumen. By the time I landed at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport Thursday evening, 17 federal agents were already involved in what the case files would later classify as significant wire fraud and identity theft targeting federal employee assets. I took the metro home. My single carry-on felt light after 2 weeks abroad. The house looked exactly the same, neat lawn, painted shutters, nothing flashy. The sold sign was gone, but Marcus had posted about that too, explaining how fast cash investors move when they smell opportunity. Inside, everything was exactly where I'd left it. My books. My coffee maker. My security system still armed. According to the federal investigation files Janet sent during my layover in Frankfurt, Marcus had conducted the entire real estate transaction using forged power of attorney documents and fabricated financial hardship claims. Friday morning, I made coffee and opened my laptop. The FinCEN database showed $400,000 in wire transfers that had triggered automatic scrutiny the moment they connected to my social security number and federal employment records. Multiple banks had filed suspicious activity reports. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit opened a case within 18 hours of the first transfer. That's when my phone started buzzing. Marcus called first, his voice tight. Maya, there's some kind of mistake. FBI agents just showed up at my office. They're asking about your house sale and saying something about federal property violations. I'm sure it's just paperwork, I said, stirring my coffee. Government bureaucracy, you know how it is. Mom called 30 minutes later, her voice high-pitched. They arrested Marcus at his office, in front of clients. They're saying he committed federal crimes, but that doesn't make sense. He was helping you. I'm sure there's an explanation, I said calmly. These things usually work themselves out. Then Dad called, angry. What kind of government job gets your brother arrested for helping with a house sale? This is insane. By Friday afternoon, the family group chat had devolved into panic and blame. Jessica asked if anyone knew a good criminal defense lawyer. Mom shared an article about federal wire fraud sentencing. Dad ranted about government overreach. I replied once. Federal agencies don't arrest people without evidence. I'm sure Marcus will be able to explain everything. Saturday morning, my doorbell rang. Through the security camera, I saw my parents, Dad's face red with fury, Mom clutching her purse like a shield. I opened the door in my robe, coffee mug in hand. Morning, Mom. Dad. Everything okay? Everything is not okay. Dad barked, pushing past me. Your brother is facing 7 years in federal prison because he tried to help you. They have recordings, forged documents, wire transfers. Maya, what is happening? I sat in my reading chair, the same place I analyzed financial crime networks 3 days a week when I wasn't abroad. What did Marcus tell the FBI? Mom's voice cracked. He told them the truth, that he was helping his sister who couldn't afford her mortgage, who was struggling on a government salary, who needed family support. Interesting, I said. What evidence did he provide that I couldn't afford my mortgage? Dad's face reddened further. Don't play games. We all know government jobs don't pay well. Marcus was trying to help. Help with what? With getting out from under this mortgage before you defaulted, Mom said, gesturing around the room. Before you ruined your credit and embarrassed the family. I nodded thoughtfully. Did Marcus mention that he never asked me about selling, that he forged power of attorney documents, or that he fabricated financial hardship claims to justify the transaction? He was protecting you from making a hard decision. Dad snapped. Family takes care of family. That's interesting, I said. Because according to the FBI, what Marcus actually did was commit identity theft, wire fraud, and the illegal transfer of federally monitored property. Those are felonies. Mom's voice dropped to a whisper. Federal monitored property? What does that mean? I looked at them, really looked. Dad in his weekend golf polo. Mom in her church dress. Both struggling to understand how their son's smart business move had become a federal crime scene. When you work for FinCEN with Level 3 security clearance, I explained, every asset is monitored for signs of compromise or coercion. Marcus's forged documents triggered automatic investigation protocols within 6 hours. The wire transfers flagged multiple banks. The FBI opened a case Tuesday morning. But you work at a desk, Mom protested. You said you do paperwork. I analyze international money laundering networks, I said. I build cases against organizations that move billions illegally through global banks. The silence stretched long enough for my coffee to cool. The house isn't my starter home, Mom. It's my secure residence while I travel internationally 8 months a year. I paid cash, $285,000, no mortgage. It's federally registered as the primary residence of a classified financial crimes investigator. Which means Marcus didn't just forge documents to steal my house. He committed federal crimes against monitored government property. Mom began to cry quietly. We thought you were struggling. You drive an old Honda. You shop at discount stores. You never talk about money. Security protocols, I said softly. People in my position live modestly to avoid attention. It's operational security. Dad looked around, noticing for the first time the reinforced windows, the disguised surveillance system, the equipment hidden in plain sight. How much do you make? He asked quietly. Enough to own this house outright, maintain investments worth more than Marcus's entire business, and live comfortably while working abroad, I replied. The financial hardship Marcus claimed never existed. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet Morrison. Arraignment scheduled Monday. 3 felony counts, identity theft, wire fraud, and federal property violations. Sentencing guidelines indicate 4 to 7 years federal prison. I showed them the message. 7 years, Mom whispered. Federal sentencing guidelines are standardized, I said. Wire fraud over $250,000 carries mandatory minimums. Identity theft adds time. Crimes involving federal assets add. Underestimating someone doesn't give you the right to commit crimes against them, I said. And federal employees take security protocols seriously, even when our families think we're just playing government desk jockey. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, refilling my coffee mug while my parents sat in stunned silence. Through the window, my neighborhood carried on with its normal Saturday routine: kids riding bikes, couples walking dogs, families washing cars and driveways. For 3 years, you've assumed I was financially struggling because I drive a Honda and shop at Target, I said, returning to the living room. You never asked about my actual situation. You never considered that someone might choose modesty for professional reasons. We were trying to help, Mom said weakly. By committing federal crimes without my knowledge or consent. I asked. By forging legal documents and fabricating financial hardship? By stealing my property and celebrating it in the family group chat? Dad looked up at me with something that might have been recognition. You're not who we thought you were. I'm exactly who I've always been, I replied. You just never asked the right questions. My phone rang. Janet Morrison, my supervisor, calling with updates on the federal investigation. I answered while my parents sat in silence, processing the complete reversal of everything they'd assumed about my life, my work, and my capabilities. Maya, Janet said, the FBI wants to interview you Monday before the arraignment. Standard procedure for federal employee asset crimes. They'll need your testimony about the unauthorized transfer and the family dynamic that enabled it. Of course, I said. Send me the briefing materials. She continued, the bank's fraud investigation found evidence that your brother researched federal employee salaries online before forging the hardship documentation. It suggests premeditation rather than misguided family assistance. I looked at my parents, both of them staring at me like they were seeing a stranger. That's consistent with the timeline, I said. He's been making comments about government salaries for months. The prosecutor believes this strengthens the case, Janet said. Premeditated fraud against federal property carries enhanced penalties. After I hung up, Mom asked, what was that about? The FBI found evidence that Marcus researched federal employee salaries before forging documents claiming I couldn't afford my mortgage, I explained. It suggests he knew he was committing fraud, not helping family. Dad put his head in his hands. This keeps getting worse. Federal investigations are thorough, I said. They don't arrest people based on misunderstandings. Mom stood slowly, clutching her purse like armor. What do we tell people? Our church, our neighbors, our friends. You tell them Marcus committed federal crimes and is facing the consequences, I said. Or you tell them nothing. That's your choice. Dad looked up. Will you visit him in prison? I considered it. That depends on whether he takes responsibility for his crimes, or keeps blaming others for the consequences of his choices. He was trying to help, Mom said again, though without conviction. He was committing felonies, I corrected gently. The motivation doesn't change the legal reality. They left 20 minutes later, walking to their car like people carrying invisible weight. From my window, I watched Dad struggle to start the engine, his hands trembling enough to make the keys rattle. Monday, the interview. By Sunday evening, the family group chat had exploded with updates. Marcus had fired his first lawyer and hired a criminal defense specialist, $500 an hour. Jessica asked if anyone could help with legal fees. Dad shared articles about federal sentencing guidelines and prison conditions. I didn't respond to any of it. Monday morning, I dressed in standard federal interview attire, conservative suit, minimal jewelry, professional but unmemorable. The FBI field office was 40 minutes away through Northern Virginia traffic that moved like cold syrup. Special Agent Rebecca Chin conducted the interview in a sterile gray conference room lit by harsh fluorescence that made everyone look slightly ill. She recorded everything as I detailed Marcus's unauthorized access to my financial data, his forged documents, and the family dynamic that made him think he could commit crimes for me. Your brother's defense attorney claims this was a misunderstanding, Agent Chin said, flipping through her notes. That he believed you were struggling financially and just wanted to help. Agent Chin, I said evenly, I work for FinCEN with level 3 security clearance. My financial assets are monitored by federal systems specifically designed to detect unauthorized activity. If I were actually struggling, those systems would have flagged it years ago. And your family was unaware of your clearance level. They were unaware of what I actually do, I said. They assumed I was a low-level clerk because I live modestly and don't talk about work. Is there any scenario where your brother could have reasonably believed you needed help? I thought about 3 years of family dinners filled with jokes about my tiny house and government salary. 3 years of assumptions based on their own insecurities rather than facts. In 3 years, Marcus never once asked about my finances, I said. He never asked about my mortgage, my income, or my expenses. He made assumptions, and acted on them. And forging power of attorney documents requires knowledge that you're committing fraud, Agent Chin added. Exactly, I said. You don't accidentally forge legal documents. The arraignment. That afternoon, Marcus stood before a federal judge in a gray suit that hung loose on his frame. He looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by the courtroom's scale and the weight of 3 felony charges. The prosecutor outlined the case. $400,000 in fraudulent wire transfers. Forged legal documents. Identity theft targeting a federal employee. Unauthorized transfer of federally monitored property. The evidence included Marcus's own text messages boasting about his smart business decision, and search records showing he'd researched federal salary ranges before fabricating hardship claims. Not guilty, he said softly. His attorney requested bail reduction based on family support. The prosecutor objected, arguing that premeditated fraud against a federal employee made Marcus a flight risk. Bail was set at $150,000 cash. As the courtroom emptied, Marcus's lawyer approached me in the hallway. Ms. Chin, he said, using my surname incorrectly. My client's family hopes you'll request leniency from the prosecutor. This was a misunderstanding that got out of hand. Your client committed 3 felonies based on assumptions he never verified, I said flatly. That's not a misunderstanding. That's criminal negligence. He was trying to help family. He was committing crimes against family, I corrected. Without permission, without knowledge, and without legal authority. The lawyer shifted uneasily. A character statement from you could help at sentencing. I'll provide whatever testimony the prosecutor requests, I said. My character assessment will be based on facts, not family ties. The sentence. 6 weeks later, Marcus pled guilty to 2 of the 3 felony charges in exchange for a reduced sentence, 4 years in federal prison, plus $425,000 in restitution and fines. During the sentencing hearing, Mom cried quietly. Dad stared straight ahead, looking like a man who'd realized too late that the map of his family was drawn upside down. When it was my turn to speak, I faced the judge. Your Honor, the defendant committed these crimes based on assumptions about my financial situation that he never verified. He forged documents, fabricated hardship claims, and transferred property without authorization because he believed his judgment outweighed mine. The impact extends beyond finances. His actions violated federal monitoring systems, threatening my clearance, my career, and my ability to serve my country. Federal employees depend on security protocols to protect classified information and personal safety. The defendant's disregard for those protocols represents a fundamental disrespect for national security measures. The judge sentenced Marcus to 4 years and 2 months in federal prison, minimum security, eligible for early release after 3 years for good behavior. Outside the courthouse, the family gathered in silence. Jessica hugged Mom. Dad stood apart, hollow-eyed. 4 years, Mom whispered. 4 years in prison for trying to help. 4 years for committing federal crimes, I said gently. The motivation doesn't change the law. Dad looked at me with something between respect and fear. We never really knew you, did we? You knew exactly who I told you I was, I said. You just decided it wasn't impressive enough to believe. Aftermath. I drove home through the slow Northern Virginia traffic that moved as if nothing had changed. My house looked the same, modest, unremarkable, easy to underestimate. Inside, I made coffee and opened my laptop to review case files on an international laundering investigation spanning 12 countries and $2.3 billion in assets. The family group chat stayed silent for 3 months. No emojis. No business advice. No assumptions about who needed help. When they finally started talking again, it was different, careful, respectful. The casual dismissal of my boring government job was gone, replaced by tentative questions I answered with my usual professional discretion. 6 months into his sentence, Marcus wrote me a letter. He apologized. He admitted he'd never asked about my financial situation before deciding I needed help. He said prison had taught him the difference between helping someone and controlling them. I wrote back once, briefly. I hope you use your time constructively. Federal prison libraries have excellent resources on financial crimes and their consequences. The family learned slowly that underestimating someone doesn't give you the right to make decisions for them. That assumptions can become crimes when you act on them without verification. That federal employees take security protocols seriously, even when their families think they're just playing government desk jockey. And I learned that sometimes, the most effective boundaries are set in federal court, with a judge, a gavel, and consequences that can't be dismissed as family drama. 4 years is a long time to think about the difference between helping and controlling, between family support and criminal behavior, between government paperwork and international financial crimes investigation. But some lessons are worth the time it takes to learn them properly.